So I thought I would just update all of our accountant listeners. If you're a CPA exam, if you're on the horizon for taking the CPA exam, or if you have CPA credits that are set to expire, uh, the boards have actually a new continuous testing model has been released for CPA exam candidates, and it's going to debut on July 1st. And this is from NASBA, the National State Board of Accountancies. And so under this continuous testing model, candidates will have the ability to take the test year round without restriction, other than waiting to receive scores from previous attempts of the same section when there's been a major change to the exam. So this, for people that don't know, under the old system, there was a 2 month on, 2 month off kind of testing window that you would have to sit through. And often you would get a notice to schedule, which would give you a 6 month window to schedule the test that you had signed up for. And if you didn't pass those tests, you would have to wait for your score to be released and then wait for a testing window to open and then pay another fee to get in there. Under this new plan, you'll be able to turn around immediately after you get your score results and reschedule a test immediately within that same window. Of course, pay for it, but it should lend itself to people being able to take more attempts at the CPA exam and allow for a more fluid kind of run through. And this is being done to try and help alleviate people like in my boat. I have two more CPA exams to take before I get mine. My credits don't expire until October, but so depending on how long this lasts could be really depending on when I get to take the test. So I just yeah, thought I'd throw that out there. If you guys have any comment on it, I'd love to hear it.
I think it sounds like a good change. I think it seems like something that should be. I never fully was all behind the logic for the 2 months on, 1 month off. I know it was kind of to split up their workload a little bit, but beyond that, I never saw too much significance in it. So yeah, I think this sounds like a change for the good.
Do you have any sense of, does this change kind of the quality of the yeah, does this mean anything about the actual knowledge of the test taker, that they're able to take it right away? What does it mean, if anything, about that?
I hadn't really contemplated that. What I do think it probably is advantageous to are those memorized. If you're a memory learner, or a crammer, I guess, and you kind of get more attempts at the test during your testing window, then you have literally more attempts to memorize what you're trying to do. But I don't necessarily know that the CPA now, I definitely have met CPAs on both sides of the coin, where very good CPA with a CPA, or a very talented bookkeeper or accountant that doesn't have a CPA. So I don't necessarily know that a CPA license speaks to the quality of accountant like I think maybe it used to. It's definitely like a hurdle that one has to get over and maintain continuing education. But I don't necessarily know if it would lead to lower quality accountants having the designation. I'd be interested to hear what your guys' thoughts on it would be, though.
Well, I mean, my first thought on it is I'm wondering how they're going to be able to implement not having cheating happen. If you're online at home, are you able to use a second computer to look things up? I wonder what they would do about that. I know that a lot of the questions are set up in such a way that you can't really Google it or something.
But to be clear, they're not doing away with the testing centers where you have to show ID and go into a sealed room and all that. They're opening up the testing ability. You'll still have to go in person and prove that it's you. Only use the test on their system, their closed system. So that portion of the test is not changing.
I see.
Yeah, but I think the intuition behind, historically, besides the logistics of grading and all that, some of the intuition philosophically behind causing some period of time to have to occur between attempts is to discourage taking the test multiple times back to back with the intent on just getting lucky one of those times to essentially pass. And I think that, I mean, to your point, AJ, about well, does taking the test and passing it actually mean anything toward the quality of you being an accountant anyway? I think that's definitely a valid discussion, a potential argument. There was one of the podcasts in this year from a group of people that I follow and think could do a good job like us on putting out content. They're called JX4. They had got all into that discussion, and I would encourage people to kind of look at some of the back and forth on that. I think it was probably episodes back towards either January or February timeframe that I saw that. And then there's lots of other great online discussion about that. So I definitely think that's a valid question or discussion. But we're talking about a scenario where we've already decided we are going to test people and credential them. So we're already on the side of saying the credential matters and that the test in some respect must matter. So now that we're talking, if we're going down that road, then does it dilute the value of it by letting people just take one right after another? Pushing you on that point, since you're in that zone of having to do it, right?
But I think it's a fair question, and I think there's also been a lot of discussion over maybe the dilution of the CPA kind of like anointment or what that means over the years. When I think the same kind of argument is made when they move from having you do all 4 tests in one shot on one day to then 4 separate tests that you would have to take. Wow, that's so easy. You only have to study for one part of it. When in fact, the reason why they changed is the amount of requirements that they had in the test it would be impossible to do all 4 on one day. Was really the way they moved it. But there was a big argument, I think, at that point where it devalued the CPA exam. So then are we saying that it dilutes it even more now? I think I think it'll bear out in the numbers, just the same way like we were talking about how cyclical a business is. They're going to have to make this move to make those people that are in that boat like I am, or even in a worse boat where their credits expire. I think they're really making this move to accommodate those people. And I think that then the numbers of the amount of people that passed and the percentage passed will then also bear out whether or not this is diluting it. Because if you see a giant jump in the amount of people that are passing the exam and the pass rate soars through the roof, then I think you could make the argument that given the extra time and the availability to be able to take a test, fail it, and then retake it again, and I think you could make that argument that then that made the test easier and you're allowing more people to have that designated license.
Yeah. Well, I mean, arguing against the question I asked too, I think even if this does result in more people passing the exam and more people getting the license, I think that's a complicated issue and nuanced in the sense of I wouldn't necessarily say that dilutes the license, because it could be that having a larger number of a diverser population of people who are able to obtain the license actually makes the body of license holders a stronger group of people with more power and meaning to it as well in some regard. So I don't believe that it necessarily needs to be. I don't believe that the nature of it needs to be artificially elitist such that it just culls the numbers of people that pass the exam. I don't think there's any reason for that to be arbitrarily a goal of the process. And indeed, if this kind of change makes the process better and easier for more highly qualified people to pass the exam, and so that we can be more inclusive and have a larger population of highly qualified people, then great. And I think that's the nuanced discussion that's difficult to really measure. It's like, well, are you diluting it so that just anybody can pass the exam and become a CPA, and it's not necessarily a larger group of more highly qualified people? Or are you expanding the tent such that you're bringing in a diverse set of highly qualified people who just make the whole profession better? I'm not smart enough to figure that out here, but I think I would say those are the interesting discussions and arguments around some of that kind of thing.
I think here's one point that we haven't brought up yet, and I think this is my kind of argument about the dilution of it, would be that I think that the onus on the CPA licensure, I think the onus on continuing to be, if you have that designation and continuing to be a contributing member and elevating the profession, I think that lies a lot on the continuing education requirements and the ethical requirements that happen after the license is issued, and not necessarily about the test itself. The test itself is a gateway to know that you need to know these basic things about those 4 subjects, and you're able to then recite those things in a test. The practicing of being a CPA, I think, is being ethical, knowing your shit, and then having the continuing education to be able to deliver on those 2 things. And I think that's much more on an onus of the after the fact of having the CPA, of keeping the quality of having the CPA designation, much more than the exam or the ability to pass the exam.
That's a very interesting I think that's a very interesting point. I mean, you've kind of framed a question here in terms of, if you had to prioritize, is it better to have a stronger gate or a stronger set of continuing requirements if the priority is to maintain a high quality profession? And I totally, I think I would lean towards what you're saying, that a stronger set of continuing requirements over a long period of time would lead to a stronger profession than just having a really strong entry point, a really strong gate at the beginning of it.
I agree.
I might want to put out there too that I'm not arguing for more CPE a year. I just want to.
Well, maybe I am, because maybe we can create it and sell CPE here. So whatever, but yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I take it back then. We need probably 120 hours a year,
Yeah. And it can be done via Zoom.
Yes, yeah. And courses need to range from about $1,200 to $2,500 a piece to keep your.
Yes.
So, what do you got, Charlie? What's next? I think we beat this one to death.
Yeah, so no, I think that was a good discussion though. And yeah, I just want to say I agree with the CPE being the major thing, especially in a changing industry.